you stupid Charlie Brown. What kind of a tree is that?
You are supposed to get a good tree. Can't you even tell a good tree from a poor tree?
I told you he'd goof it up. He's not the kind you can depend on to do anything right. You're hopeless, Charlie Brown. Completely hopeless.
Rats! You've been dumb before, Charlie Brown, but this time you really did it.
In October 1950, Charles M. Schulz created the comic strip Peanuts, and along with it a whole host of interesting characters. Snoopy is a beagle with a seemingly boring life to the extent that he fantasizes about being a war hero in World War I. Linus relies on a blanket for reassurance and comfort. And I'm pretty sure Schroeder is the first high-functioning autistic character in a comic strip. But despite all of these characters being interesting in their own right, today I'm going to talk about Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown is a very unique protagonist because Charlie Brown gets no love. And when I say no love, I don't mean he is socially isolated. I mean he is actively bullied by basically everyone. This is a child who is made fun of for any slip-up he makes in baseball. A child who is ridiculed for feeling the slightest sense of affection and attraction towards one of his peers. A child who is specifically targeted on Halloween to only receive rocks during trick-or-treating. Every other show during this time depicted a dysfunctional but loving family, such as the Jetsons or the Flintstones, so when Peanuts came onto the scene, it changed things gradually. Later on, the show in particular tried to give Charlie Brown a happy ending, though with the original endings, the most heartwarming it got was when the children decided to tolerate Charlie Brown because it was Christmas. Now, it's very clear that Charlie Brown has some form of depression, and I'm not the first to say this, nor am I the first to make a video about it. But it seems to me Charlie Brown in many ways was the foundation for later characters sharing similar qualities of sadness and unfulfillment. The first character I want to talk about is BoJack Horseman, and just a heads up, I haven't finished Series 5 of the show and have yet to start Series 6. I will at some point, but for now I'll just be discussing aspects from the first 4.5 series. So, for those unfamiliar, BoJack is a washed-up actor who used to star in a sitcom from the 90s and now tries to pursue new projects and relationships to get a sense of fulfillment. As much as it's no secret that Charlie Brown has depression, it's even more not a secret that BoJack has it too. In fact, people who watch the show have diagnosed him with depression, addiction, trauma, and much more. One of his lines which has stuck with me the most is in Series 3 Episode 5, in which BoJack says that one day you're going to look around and you're going to realize that everybody loves you, but nobody likes you. This line perfectly encapsulates BoJack's story, as far as I've watched, about how BoJack does receive success throughout his life as an actor, though sooner or later it goes wrong for him, often due to the fault of his own. Because on the surface people adore BoJack as an actor, usually for his role on the sitcom Horsing Around, though whenever he interacts with people on a more personal level, he often ends up making them hate him. This is different from Charlie Brown's endless verbal and sometimes physical assaults, mainly because Peanuts is a show for children and therefore attempted to educate children about these subjects on a very basic level. But there are links between the two shows, and I'm not reaching here because they do parody Peanuts in an episode of BoJack, though only for a brief segment in a scene where BoJack tries to hear that he's a good person from the people closest to him. I think those who watch BoJack do know that he isn't a good person, though at the same time you can't help but feel sorry for him in the flashbacks of his childhood in which he's constantly berated by his parents. This is somewhat similar to Charlie Brown's childhood, though he's berated by children his own age and his parents seem very absent throughout all of the abuse, which could lead viewers to believe that Charlie Brown may go down a similar path to BoJack, but that's a video for another time. The next character is different from the others in this video, as the only one who isn't the main character of their respected show. You could argue that Snoopy is really the main character of Peanuts, which may be the case in the comic strips, but in the case of the show he mainly held the side plot. The character I'm talking about is Milhouse Van Houten. As an avid watcher of classic Simpsons, Milhouse has remained one of my favourite characters. But you might ask, why do a segment about Milhouse when there are clearly more obvious choices for a character with depression like Kirk Van Houten or even Frank Grimes? Well, I'm saving those characters for a later video, and neither are featured as much as Milhouse. As you probably all know, Milhouse appears throughout the show as the archetypal beta male, being the subject of bullying from Nelson and constantly playing second fiddle to Bart. The episode I want to talk about is Series 7 Episode 2 entitled Radioactive Man, in which Hollywood chooses Springfield as the shooting location for a movie adaptation of the superhero comic, and Milhouse is cast as the sidekick Fallout Boy despite not wanting to audition and being pushed into it by his parents. This episode is one of my favourites, as it demonstrates a side of Milhouse that we simultaneously haven't seen before, and yet have seen many times. Milhouse receives a great deal of fame for landing this role, the role he's played many times before as a sidekick, though is never truly happy. Unlike other examples, Milhouse doesn't long for fulfillment through this status. In fact, he wants to distance himself from it completely. Ultimately, this episode demonstrates how Milhouse, despite playing a superhero, is powerless throughout the episode, being forced into auditioning by his parents and then being used like a puppet by the Hollywood executives, only making his own decision at the end when he abandons it all. This isn't exactly analogous to Charlie Brown or BoJack Horseman's characters, as Milhouse doesn't long for admiration from others, though his situation is very much like theirs, and it further demonstrates the manner in which he becomes powerless in such a situation due to past abuse conditioning him to do so. I'm sure if BoJack had the choice to leave show business and just be satisfied with the admiration of friends and family, it seems like something he'd do. The final character I'd like to talk about comes from the medium of anime. Since anime is known for a whole host of sad boy characters from shows I have not watched, since I'm not a weeaboo, I'm going to talk about the protagonist of perhaps the only anime I have watched, Saitama from One Punch Man. For those who don't know, Saitama is the strongest superhero in the world, with the ability to kill basically anyone with a single punch, hence the name of the show. No, the character is not called One Punch Man, the character is called Saitama. Anyway, in the third episode and second manga, Saitama explains how he was able to become so strong simply by working to a strict workout regimen every day. Though despite putting in all of this effort, Saitama ultimately feels unfulfilled, as throughout the show he constantly strives to find an opponent whom he won't be able to kill in a single punch. Along the way he does discover a few enemies, but even the strongest he defeats in 5 or 6 punches. As well as this, Saitama, much like Charlie Brown, doesn't receive any admiration for his efforts to keep the city safe, but rather receives insults, and people view him as a danger rather than a hero. He is placed in a hero registry where he is ranked as a B-class hero, despite him probably being able to defeat any of the members of the A and S class. In an episode in Series 2, it's revealed that a hero in S-Class said to be the strongest hero is actually a fraud and has just been credited for all of Saitama's efforts by simply being in the right place at the right time. Whereas in many cases, Saitama himself is seen as the villain by the public. The only person who does seem to appreciate Saitama is Genos, a cyborg who wants to be Saitama's disciple. The problem with this is that whenever Genos and Saitama appear to stop an attack on the city, Genos receives all the admiration. This entire experience leaves Saitama in a mild-mannered state, though with rage-induced outbursts whenever he feels like he's being ridiculed. Though I could just attribute this to the way anime characters tend to be. The point I'm trying to reach in this video is how all of these characters share similarities with how they are perceived and treated, and how that ultimately makes them constantly wanting something different. As some of these characters do actually experience success, yet none of them feel successful. each experienced something similar to Charlie Brown, whether it be verbal insults or bullying. I'm not saying Charlie Brown invented bullying, but thanks to his character, we see a wider range of character development in media nowadays.